Out on the edge of Silverton, where the wind never stops whisperin' through the sagebrush, lived a cowboy who'd buried his heart right beside his wife's grave. He was done with love, done with surprises, until the night his 2 daughters came home, dragging a wounded stranger from the dark. Who was she? And why were dangerous men hunting her across the plains? Let's find out.
Before we dive in, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. We've got more powerful stories coming every single day, and you don't want to miss them. Now, let's begin.
The sun was slipping behind the red hills, spilling gold over the wide land of the Crow Ranch. Wind carried the dry scent of dust and cattle, brushing against weathered fence posts and the long grass that hadn't seen rain in weeks. Silas Crow leaned on the corral gate, sweat darkening his shirt, hands rough from another day that looked exactly like the one before. The world around him moved slow, a place where time didn't pass, it just circled. From the porch came the laughter of his daughters, May and Ruth, faint and far like the memory of a song. He turned toward the sound, but didn't smile. May was nearly grown now, quiet like her father. Ruth still ran barefoot through the yard, chasing the barn cats and asking when their mama was coming back. A question that hit like a spur every time. Inside, the stove clattered as May set the table. The smell of cornbread drifted through the open window, soft and familiar. Silas checked the sky, counting clouds that wouldn't bring rain, then tightened the latch on the gate. Another day done, another silence waiting in the house. The hills beyond the ranch rolled dark and endless, hiding secrets in their shadows. Silas didn't know it yet, but before the next dawn, something, or someone, would cross those hills and change everything he thought he'd buried. Out here, a man can outlast the wind, but can he outlast the silence? The Crow House sat quiet under the moan of the evening wind. Inside, the lamplight flickered over a rough-hewn table, catching the dust that danced in the air. May ladled stew into tin bowls, her movements steady, practiced, the way her mother used to. Ruth swung her legs beneath the bench, humming some half-forgotten lullaby, off-key and innocent. Silas Crow sat at the head of the table, shoulders stooped, hands scarred from work. He ate in silence, eyes on the wood grain, the way he always did. Words had left him years ago, somewhere between his wife's last breath and the cold hill where he buried her. The only sounds now were the scrape of spoons and the low groan of the wind pressing against the shutters. Ruth broke the quiet. "Pa," she said softly, "do you think Ma can see us from heaven?" The spoon froze halfway to Silas's mouth. May shot her sister a look, but Ruth's question hung there, heavy, trembling. Silas set his spoon down, stared into the stew, and said only, "Eat while it's warm." His voice was low, rough as gravel. May finished first, gathered the dishes, and started washing up without a word. Ruth kept humming, her tune carrying a faint sadness through the room. Outside, something shifted, a distant sound, a breath, a whisper beyond the corral. Silas lifted his head, listening. The air had changed. The wind carried more than dust now. It carried warning. Every meal tasted the same, until that night when strangers' footsteps broke the silence. Let's find out what came next. The night settled heavy over the valley, turning the fields to silver and shadow. A restless wind tugged at the barn roof as May and Ruth stepped outside to fetch water before bed. The lantern May carried threw a trembling ring of light ahead of them, catching dust and moths in its glow. Ruth skipped a few steps ahead, humming softly. When the sound came, a faint cry, thin and broken, carried by the wind, she froze. "May, you hear that?" May listened. There it was again. Not an animal, not the wind. A voice, weak but human. Without thinking, she set the lantern low and motioned for Ruth to stay close. They followed the sound toward the creek that cut behind the pasture, their boots sinking into the soft earth. Under the leaning cottonwoods they found her, a woman half covered in brush, barefoot and bleeding from a cut across her leg. Her dark hair clung to her face, tangled with dirt and burrs. She blinked against the lantern light, eyes wide, wild, as if she didn't trust the world to be real. Ruth gasped, "May, she's hurt!" May knelt, heart racing. "It's okay, we got you. We'll take you home." The woman tried to speak, but only a whisper came out. "No, they'll come back." May didn't ask who they were. She just helped her up, throwing the woman's arm over her shoulder. Together, the sisters half carried, half dragged her through the dark field toward the warm glow of their house, unaware of the danger that followed her across the plains. The night wasn't quiet anymore. It was alive and watching. The door slammed open under May's hand, wind rushing in behind her. Silas Crow looked up from the hearth, startled as his daughters stumbled inside, mud on their boots, fear in their eyes. Between them hung a woman, limp and trembling, her dress torn at the shoulder and her feet bare. "She was down by the creek," May said, breathless. "She's hurt bad." Silas stared at the stranger, jaw tight. Every instinct told him trouble had walked through his door. He hesitated, then stepped forward and cleared a space near the fire. "Lay her down." The woman winced as they lowered her onto the rug. Her skin was cold, her pulse faint. Silas poured water into a tin cup and handed it to her. "What's your name?" he asked. She swallowed hard. "Ayanna." The word came soft, heavy with an accent that didn't belong to these plains. Ruth crouched beside her, wide-eyed. "Who hurt you?" Ayanna's gaze flicked to the window, to the darkness beyond. "Men," she whispered. "They took me. I ran." Silas's hand went to the rifle leaning against the wall. For a long moment, no one spoke, only the fire crackled, filling the silence between breaths. May met her father's eyes, pleading, protective. "She can stay, just for tonight." Silas looked at the woman again, broken, scared, but proud. He nodded once. "You'll sleep here. We'll see come morning." As the firelight danced across her bruised face, the wind outside shifted, carrying whispers of hoofbeats far off in the dark. Would you have opened your door or turned her away? Tell us in the comments. Morning came slow and gold, spreading across the valley like a blessing. Ayanna woke to the smell of coffee and the soft creak of the ranch house coming alive. For a moment, she didn't move, unsure if she was safe or still trapped in the nightmare she'd fled. Then she saw Ruth curled up near the hearth with a blanket, and May pouring water into a basin. The sight steadied her. "Can you sit up?" May asked gently. Ayana nodded, wincing as pain flared in her leg. Silas stood in the doorway, hat in hand, unreadable as the horizon. "There's chores need doin'," he said, his tone flat but not unkind. "Stay off that leg if you can." Instead, by midday, Ayana was outside, limping through the yard with a bucket in each hand. The chickens scattered as she moved among them, smiling faintly at Ruth's giggles. Her movements were careful, graceful, like someone who'd known work all her life. May joined her, showing where to pour the feed. From the barn, Silas watched. He told himself he didn't trust her, but there was something in the way she moved, quiet, deliberate, unafraid, that unsettled his certainty. By sunset, the day's rhythm had shifted. The girls laughed more. The house smelled of bread. And when Ayana hummed softly by the window, the melody wrapped through the room like something half forgotten, half home. Silas paused at the doorway, arms folded, eyes on her silhouette. He wasn't sure what she was running from, only that trouble never ran far. Still, for the first time in years, the house didn't feel hollow. It felt alive. 3 days later, Silas Crow rode into Silverton for supplies. The morning sun was sharp, burning through the haze as horses kicked up red dust along the main street. The town hadn't changed. Same faces, same half-curious stares when the quiet rancher rode in. Folks still called him the ghost on the ridge. He tied his mare outside the general store and stepped inside. The smell of coffee, tobacco, and grain hit him all at once. Sheriff McCade stood by the counter, talking low with 2 ranch hands. Their words carried just enough for Silas to hear. "Bounty riders came through last night," one said, "looking for some woman, an escapee. Said she was dangerous." Silas's grip tightened on the sack of feed. He kept his face blank, eyes fixed on the ledger. "Word is she headed north," the other added. "Might have crossed near Crow Creek." McCade glanced up, noticing Silas, but saying nothing. The sheriff's eyes lingered just a second too long, knowing more than he let on. Silas finished paying and left without a word. As he mounted his horse, his mind raced. That woman, Ayana, had brought more than fear with her. She'd brought a trail. The ride home felt longer. Every shadow on the ridge looked like movement. Every sound in the wind whispered danger. He could keep her safe, but at what cost to his family? "Let's find out." The wind rose after sundown, rattling the shutters like restless spirits. Silas sat at the table cleaning his rifle, the oil lamp casting long shadows across the room. Ayana stood by the hearth, folding blankets for the girls, her movements quiet and careful. The silence between them felt heavier than the storm outside. Finally, Silas spoke. "Those men you ran from, they still comin'?" Ayana's hands froze. She didn't look up. "They always come," she whispered, "no matter how far I run." He studied her face, the bruise fading on her cheek, the scar along her wrist. "You gonna tell me why?" She hesitated, eyes fixed on the flame. "They took my people," she said softly. "Traders, bounty riders, men who hunt for coin. I escaped near the border, followed the river north." Her voice trembled but didn't break. "I thought I'd die out there before I found kindness again." Silas looked down at the rifle, then back at her. "Ain't much kindness left in this land," he said. Ayanna turned toward him, the firelight flickering across her eyes. "There's some here," she said simply. The words hit him harder than any bullet. He cleared his throat, uneasy, and stood. "You and the girls best lock the doors tonight." Outside, thunder rolled over the ridge, deep and slow, like hooves in the dark. Silas didn't know if it was weather or warning. Either way, he knew sleep wouldn't come easy. The moon hid behind thick clouds, turning the valley into a sheet of darkness. Silas sat by the window, boots on, rifle across his knees. He hadn't told the girls, but he'd seen dust on the southern ridge earlier. Riders, maybe 3 or 4, moving slow, deliberate. Now the night air carried a sound he knew too well, the low, distant thud of hooves. Inside, Ayanna was tucking May and Ruth into the back room. She looked calm, but her eyes darted toward the door with every creak of the floorboards. Silas met her gaze. "They found you," he said quietly. Ayanna nodded once, no surprise in her face. "They never stop." The first shot shattered the front window. May screamed. Silas shoved the girls behind the stove, chambered around, and fired back into the dark. The roar echoed across the plains. Horses reared. Men shouted. Ayanna grabbed the spare rifle from the wall, hands steady. "Show me where." Silas pointed to the window. "Keep low." Their movements fell into rhythm. His firing, her reloading. Smoke filled the room. When it cleared, 2 riders lay still in the yard. The rest turned and fled into the Black Hills. Silas lowered his gun, chest heaving. Ayanna looked at him through the smoke, face streaked with ash and sweat. He realized then she wasn't the one who needed saving. When danger rode in under moonlight, he didn't just fight for survival, he fought for something worth living for. Let's find out what comes after. Dawn crept slow over the Crow Ranch, painting the fields in pale gray and ash. The air still smelled of gunpowder, sharp and bitter, hanging heavy in the quiet. Silas Crow stood on the porch, boots planted in the dirt, eyes fixed on the 2 lifeless men sprawled near the corral. Their horses were long gone, nothing left but blood in the dust and the echo of what had happened. Inside, Ayanna knelt by the hearth, wiping soot from her face. May and Ruth clung to her, too tired to cry, too shocked to speak. Silas stepped inside, setting the rifle against the wall. "They won't be back," he said, though his voice carried doubt beneath the words. Ayanna looked up, her dark hair tangled, her hands shaking. "You risked your life for me," she whispered. Silas shook his head. "For my family," he said, but his eyes lingered on hers a heartbeat longer than he meant to. She rose slowly, took a cloth from the table, and wrapped it around the scrape on his arm. Her touch was gentle, sure. "Still," she said quietly, "you could have let me run." He almost smiled. "I ain't built that way." The wind pushed through the open doorway, stirring the curtains like ghosts passing by. The ranch felt different now, smaller, safer, alive again after the storm. The girls had stopped trembling. Ruth even managed a weak smile when Ayanna brushed her hair aside. Silas looked out across the land, his land, and felt something stir inside him he thought was gone forever. Not peace, not yet, but maybe the start of it. By midday, the valley shimmered with heat. The gunfire echoes had faded, but word in Silverton traveled faster than wind. Sheriff McCade rode up the Crow Trail alone, dust trailing behind his bay mare. eyes sharp beneath the brim of his hat. He reined in by the porch, where Silas Crow stood waiting, rifle resting against the rail, hands steady but wary. "Morning, Silas," the sheriff said. "Heard some trouble came your way." "Couple of riders tried their luck," Silas replied. "Didn't end well for 'em." McCade dismounted slow, surveying the yard, the churned soil, the dark stains near the fence. "Bounty men," he muttered, crouching to inspect a boot print. "Mean sort. You know what they are after?" Silas's jaw tightened. "Reckon they picked the wrong house." From the doorway, Ayanna stood half in shadow, the girls peeking behind her. McCade glanced up, eyes narrowing slightly as he took her in. The bruises, the wary stance. He said nothing, just straightened, brushed the dust off his knees, and nodded once. "Looks like self-defense to me," he said finally. "I'll file it that way." Silas gave a short nod of thanks. The sheriff mounted again, turning his horse toward town. "Some things," he added over his shoulder, "ain't worth putting on paper." When he was gone, the ranch was silent again, except for the whisper of the wind through the cottonwoods. Ayanna stepped onto the porch, standing beside Silas. Their eyes met, no words, just understanding. Some truths don't belong on paper, only in the hearts of those who lived them. Let's find out where that truth leads. Winter rolled in quiet, blanketing the Crow Ranch in soft white and calm. Smoke curled from the chimney like a promise, and the world outside slowed to the rhythm of crackling wood and muffled laughter. Inside, the house felt different, warmer, lived in, full of sounds that had been missing for too long. Ayanna stood by the stove, sleeves rolled, flour dusting her hands as she shaped dough for bread. Ruth sat on the floor, stringing dried berries for decoration, humming in that same sweet, off-key tune. May helped her father mend a saddle strap near the fire, their conversation easy, unhurried. Silas watched them all with quiet wonder. The ranch that once echoed with emptiness now breathed again, with voices, music, the simple joy of being together. The grief that had haunted him for years felt softer now, worn down by laughter and the smell of bread rising. When the wind howled outside, the walls no longer sounded lonely. The girls huddled close as Ayanna told stories in her gentle voice, words from a world far beyond the plains. Silas listened, his heart steady, his gaze fixed not on the fire, but on her. The storm passed. The night turned peaceful. Silas reached for Ayanna's hand without thinking. She didn't pull away. In that small, silent moment, the ghosts finally left the house. Spring came gentle to the valley, washing away the last of the frost. The cottonwoods budded pale green, and the air carried the clean scent of new grass. Silas Crow walked the worn path behind the barn, his daughters at his side, Ayanna just behind them. They climbed the hill slowly, boots sinking into the soft earth still damp from the thaw. At the top stood the small wooden cross he'd built years ago, weathered, leaning slightly but still strong, Margaret's resting place. Silas paused there, removing his hat. May and Ruth knelt to leave wildflowers they'd gathered by the creek, their voices quiet as prayer. Ayanna stood a few paces back, unsure whether she belonged in this sacred space of memory and loss. Silas turned, meeting her eyes, and reached out a rough, calloused hand. "Come on," he said softly. She stepped forward, her hand sliding into his. No grand words, no promises, just a simple truth between them. The girls smiled, the breeze lifting their hair, carrying laughter down the hill. For a long while, the four of them stood together beneath the wide sky, a family stitched together by chance, courage, and grace. The pain of the past still lingered, but it no longer owned them. The land, once hollow, now breathed with life again. As they walked back toward the house, sunlight spilled over the ranch, warm and golden. Silas looked at Ayanna, and for the first time in years, the weight in his chest was gone. Sometimes love doesn't come riding in on a white horse. Sometimes it walks barefoot out of the wild.
Thank you for watching till the end. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this. We'll be dropping brand new powerful stories every single day. See you on the next one.